Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Patreon-sponsored review time again, and we have an interesting one. We're basically going back to a previous review I've done to fill in some gaps. Secret Origins Month is about showing off the first appearances of superheroes, to see what it was that got these characters to endure for so long. Not necessarily their origin story, but the first time anyone laid eyes on them. But back in the Gold and Silver Ages, most of the time the books they premiered in were anthologies. Superheroes made up only one part of what was inside them, and that was certainly the case for Action Comics #1, Superman's first appearance. No one really gives a rat's ass about anyone else who was in the book, it's all about Superman. And that was the attitude I had when I reviewed it. We were there to look at Superman and nothing else. However, the patron for today said they actually expected me to go back and look at this stuff at some point, so here we are. And since it'll be the second year in a row without a Secret Origins Month, sorry, this November belongs to Doctor Who's 60th anniversary, we should get some Golden Age stuff in. Let's dig into Action Comics #1 again and look at all the non-Superman stories.
The fourth wall, where bad comics burn. Linkara's gonna teach you all a lesson you won't learn. What's with these awkward subjects? What's all this art so rubbish? To anyone who's had a bad comic published, it could be your turn. Linkara, he is a man, punch, sporadically a grouch. Linkara, he has his own spaceship, but he's always on his couch. Linkara, a universe in flux, Linkara. This comic sucks, Linkara.
No point in talking about the cover since, well, we already did it once before, and we're not looking at Superman anyway. So after Superman kidnaps a lobbyist bribing a senator to do the dastardly deed of joining World War II, Superman! Not interested in stopping Nazis! We get the black and white tale of Chuck Dawson. When Charles Dawson, owner of the Circle D Ranch, is killed in a bloody Texas range war, his young son and only heir goes to live with an uncle, a horse raiser in Wyoming, but he would return after hiring the A-Team. The boy, known as Chuck, grows to manhood, with the build of an athlete and an almost uncanny skill with the rifle and six-gun. A pity he was as dumb as a sack of rocks. Chuck now begins to think about taking up the fight against the crooked cattlemen who killed his father, first by suing them in civil court. Chuck indeed decides to head back to reclaim the range in the town of Red Gulch, though his uncle thinks it's a fool's errand because the corrupt ranchers control everything there. Once there, he finds a cowboy named Notch Logan shooting guns into a saloon. He spots Chuck. "Hey, you! Get in there with the rest of them cow nurses!" Showdown at the farm veterinarian. When Chuck refuses, the guy throws a punch that he's able to avoid, probably by using his hat to stay in place while he dodges. Escaping the puncher's vicious swing by the fraction of an inch, Chuck leaps over the hitch rack and lands a crushing blow to the bully's bristling chin. How do you like this? Oh yeah, I've been streaming Red Dead Redemption 2 at the time of this episode's release, so I'm used to this happening every 5 minutes. He orders Notch to clear out, but he promises to get revenge. "Look here, I'm the sheriff, and I'm not partial to strangers coming here and stirring up trouble. Only locals like Notch are allowed to stir up trouble." He advises him to leave, but Chuck explains that he's not exactly a stranger and he's got business to attend to. While our hero goes to get some food, the owner of the 4G Ranch, John Burwell, who looks suspiciously like Teddy Roosevelt, learns of Chuck's entry into town and orders his men, Trigger and Butch, to follow him and murder him discreetly. They soon find him at the restaurant, planning to ambush him. "I see him! He's still eating! My God, that's like his 5th plate of pork and beans! What were they feeding that kid in Wyoming?" They needed to look like a fight to keep things clean. As such, they have Trigger bump into him on the sidewalk when he leaves. Trigger tries to pull his gun, but Chuck shoots the gun out of his hand. Chuck then proceeds to kick his ass. "Now then, take that! And a little jujitsu!" A cowboy who knows jujitsu. That old Wild West cliche. Anyone can fight with a gun. It's true, just ask Wyatt Earp, he'll beat your ass with it. Butch shoots at Chuck and seems to kill him, the sheriff soon pulling up. The sheriff examines him and sees that Chuck is just knocked out. The bullet grazed his skull. Still, the BS story the two goons gave, and having already warned Chuck to leave, the sheriff decides to arrest him and take our unconscious hero to jail. He's left with a deputy as he wakes up and decides that something is up with this town. As such, he lures the deputy over, grabs his gun, and orders him to unlock the door. You can't get away with this! Maybe not, but you're not gonna get away with being that stupid, dude. I'm pretty sure you're fired. He ties up the deputy and retrieves his own gun, but then hears footsteps in the outer office. Well, actually, he hears a footstep, so I guess someone out there took a single step. He declares that he's going out the door and no one is going to stop him, ending this story. While Action Comics #1 is known primarily as the debut of Superman, there was another superhero introduced in the book who had a less popular career, but certainly a very strong legacy. Zatara, Master Magician. Zatara is probably better known these days as the father of Justice Leaguer, backwards talker, magician, and fishnet enthusiast Zatanna. Zatara is one of the few examples of a character who has stayed dead with very little chance of coming back. His daughter is a far more popular character, and he died sacrificing himself to save her. Like with the Dan Garrett Blue Beetle, people tend to prefer him as the starter of the legacy, but not really interesting enough to come back compared to who came after. But let's get into the actual story. Zatara, Master Magician, sells these little enamel pins with his face on them. Champion of law and order, the world's greatest magician and his faithful assistant, Tong, have dedicated their lives to wiping out the forces of outlawry led by the beautiful woman criminal and Zatara's archenemy, the Tigress. But only the criminals led by her, all the other ones are fine. Now they are attempting to solve the mystery of the freight train robberies. We see Zatara and Tong talking about the robberies. This is serious, Tong, so could you please put on a shirt? Yeah, Tong is kind of a mildly racist caricature. He's overall fine in this story, but there are plenty of stories from this era across all media where a white dude adventurer has a non-white servant like this. It's usually a Middle Easterner in particular because they're meant to seem exotic and weird. No shirt, the earring, the turban, the metal bands around his arms. Tong himself is Indian apparently, but it's the same type of deal. Like I said, he's fine here. He doesn't really do much other than act as additional muscle for Zatara and say, "Yes, master," a lot. He apparently didn't stick around past the early days, but he was still apparently seen in a flashback as recently as 2009. Anyway, freight train robberies. In the last few weeks, 2 railroad detectives have been killed, a brakeman murdered, and $200,000 taken in loot. And yet they're still stopping the railroad union from striking. Tong suspects the Tigress's involvement, though Zatara consults his crystal ball.
I'm getting a C prompt. Hold on.
The crystal has never been wrong. I can plainly see that another attempt will be made to rob the train. This link I got from a friend on Discord says I should input my social security number. Well, the crystal's never been wrong before, so... He contacts his detective friend, Brady, and the three board the train intended to be robbed along with another detective, all of them soon climbing to the roof of the train.
Ow! The dust! It's like being shot in the eyes by a glitter gun.
The other detective gets shot by one of the robbers, Tong managing to save him before he falls off. The detective is merely stunned, and Zatara gestures with his hands, producing a first aid kit. And Zatara proves himself to be a better sorcerer than Doctor Strange because he can actually use both magic and medicine to heal a bullet wound! Then again, bullets from the 30s apparently merely stun you, so maybe it was less of a big deal. When he recovers, he states that Brady is actually in league with the robbers, which is a bit confusing, because I thought Brady was the other guy in the checkered suit. Then again, they don't even really mention in the narration the other guys accompanying them. The establishing shot of them boarding the train doesn't really do a good job of showing who is Brady. In any case, Brady's betrayal is short-lived as he gets flung from one of the boxcars while the Tigress sneaks up behind Zatara. She shoves him off the train, but fortunately he's able to float safely to the ground using his magic. Tong, still on the train, gets the engineer to stop it and the state police come in. Zatara can't believe that Brady was involved with the crooks. But Captain Kennedy, I'm sure Brady wasn't connected with this mob. He's connected to a completely different mob. Why would he be double dipping like that? Tong and Zatara search the train cars, discovering something drawn on a rail car. Look, a chalk mark. And this is the car from which Brady was thrown to his death. Wait, isn't that the operator symbol? Holy crap, did Slender Man kill Brady? So checkerboard guy, or maybe just a different guy wearing a similar suit, was actually the train inspector named Babcock. He tells Zatara that he wouldn't be surprised if the magician was also in on it. Babcock is the man who holds the solution to this mystery. I know that because I'm magic. I don't have to explain it. Zatara swears to the other detectives that he'll round up Tigress's gang as well as prove Brady wasn't working with them. He comes up with a plan to finally capture the Tigress, having valuables spread out all over the train. Master, I saw many evil-looking men go into a shack back there. Ah, the NFT salesmen have arrived. Zatara spots said evil-looking men and decides to use his powers to freeze them until the cops can carry out the plan. Also, check out this sign. Chew, cut, plug. A weird advertisement for what to do with power cables. The Tigress sees Zatara use his magic, consequently the first time utilizing the signature backwards talk that Zatanna would be famous for, and pistol whips Zatara in the back of the head, as with Chuck Dawson utilizing the tombstone technique. With Zatara knocked down, the goons are released from the spell and proceed to beat him up. The goons ask if they should kill him, but the Tigress wants to handle that herself. And man, given her fashion sense, maybe Queen Bee would have been a better moniker. In any case, she ties him up and dumps kerosene everywhere, planning to burn him alive. After they set the place on fire and leave, Zatara is able to loosen his bonds. Even if he didn't have actual magic, he is a magician after all, and escape. He uses his magic to summon Tong from wherever he was. Would have been really awkward if Tong had been using the bathroom during this. And they spot Babcock coming out of a nearby building and commenting that they're finally rid of Zatara, inviting Tong to grab him and our hero to use hypnosis on him. He takes Babcock's weapon. Guess I can use this myself. The real magic is guns. He sends Tong off with Babcock to the police station and gets on board a passing train, then leaps over to the one that they were going to use to trap the Tigress. He spots the symbol again. Here's a mark. My trick is working well so far. Wait, no, that's the everyman hybrid symbol. I got on the wrong train. The symbol was apparently used to mark which train cars to steal from, so when the Tigress's goons stop by, they spot it and begin emptying the crates and boxes along the side of the road. They spot Zatara and try to shoot him. Zatara shoots back. Your aim is very poor, my friend. Zatanna, my daughter. Someday you will encounter many hellish, supernatural creatures in this world. Make sure you're always packing heat. After locking up the other goons in the train car, the Tigress climbs up and aims a gun point blank at Zatara. A quick gesture of his hand, and the Tigress's gun is transformed into a bullet. A banana-shaped and sized bullet. She leaps off the train, and wow, this comic keeps having people do that, and it feels like there should be a lot more injuries of this happening, especially when it's from on top of the train. The cops soon arrive and arrest both the goons in the train and the truck that was picking up the discarded boxes. Zatara explains how Babcock, as the train inspector, would leave a car open for thieves, said thieves using the symbol to indicate which ones to break into. At the police station, Babcock confesses that Brady was innocent, that they killed him, and had someone swap places with him in the tunnel to throw off suspicion. And so our story ends with the sad news that the Tigress escaped, but Zatara and Tong ready to go after her again. This humble person seeks a bit of sleep before the next Tigress hunt. I mean, my eyes were so tired I couldn't tell if she had anything remotely tiger-related about her appearance. After a prose story, we have a standard comedy story, which is admittedly kind of weird when you think about it for a book called Action Comics, but whatever. Sticky Mitt Simpson. You know, they make a cream for that now. In this case, it's about a thief who keeps clumsily running away from cops until he inexplicably just happens to disguise himself as a construction worker, and there just happens to be another construction worker he looks like whom the cops are distracted by. Weird. Next up, it's the first part of The Adventures of Marco Polo, where Marco, at the age of 17, sets out on a journey with his father and uncle from Armenia. Our king has just received word from the newly elected pope requesting your immediate appearance at his residence at Acre. He kept calling out for you, just yelling, "Marco!" without any response. They go to the Pope, who, in this panel with only text in it, dispatches them to the Khan of Tartary, as he is requesting priests and smart people to impart knowledge to his country. Unfortunately, since they're traveling on an Armenian ship, they encounter Babylonian ships along the way. And the Armenians are at war with Babylonia. They just barely manage to survive the attack before reaching a fortified harbor, though the group is reluctant to continue the perilous journey to the Khan. And if this bit seems a little lacking in humor, it's because this little history lesson is kind of dry. It's not terrible, but it's not too exciting either. They head out into the desert for the next stage of the journey, where Marco becomes lost in a soft place and gives some water to dream of the endless, which despite not being great in my opinion, was still more interesting than this story. The next leg after that has new perils, the ferocious Barari men, who act as bandits to anyone who travels the Kargar Pass. They set a trap for the Barari, leading some of them into a narrow pass as they've split up their group, one staying in the cliff sides above the pass to hurl rocks down at the bandits, which ends the adventures of Marco Polo for this issue, which frankly reads more like the adventures of Marco Polo's dad, and Marco Polo just happens to be around for this stuff. Next up, let's meet Pep Morgan. Pep Morgan, versatile young athlete, is fighting Sailor Sorensen for the coveted light heavyweight championship. Man, I know they added a bunch of new senshi for season 5 of Sailor Moon, but Sailor Sorensen just seems like a silly name. Pop Burkett, Pep's trainer and pal, is in the fighter's corner. No punctuation to separate the sentences. Sailor is managed by the unscrupulous Doc Lowry. And yet somehow I don't expect either of these people to tell their fighters to eat lightning and crap thunder. In their final round, Pep finds himself blinded, yet is still able to knock Sailor out to become the new champion. What was it that he blinded me for a while, Pop? Was only liniment, Pep. Doc Lowry rubbed some on Sailor's gloves, which is why they ban Icy Hot in professional boxing. Yeah, Doc Lowry, he's no good. They won't let him practice medicine on account of he's so crooked, although it might also be because he recommended to a cancer patient to just punch the tumor. The Boxing Commission investigates the blinding incident, but can't prove that Lowry did it. Doc Lowry claims the second had mixed the bottles by mistake. And from what bottle was he supposed to be smearing stuff on the boxer's gloves then? Still, they recommend he get out of town anyway because of his dirty ways of doing things, but he promises that they'll hear from him. We cut to 6 months later, where apparently Doc has gotten a new fighter named Boomerang, and he's apparently a wild bushman and a missing link. The term bushman can be racist, it's not always considered so. But with the description of him and kind of the way he's drawn, I'm just gonna sing it. 1930s casual racism. Pep and Pop go watch a fight featuring Boomerang, where it seems his opponent starts getting slower and groggier as it goes on, until Boomerang knocks him out. Pep is unconvinced that the guy would go down, so he hires some detectives to keep a close eye on the fight with Pop to see if anything shady's going down. And indeed, during it, Boomerang touches Pep's face with the palm of his glove, and he starts getting dizzy. He still manages to knock out the guy, but the detectives then leap into the ring and examine Boomerang's glove, a hypodermic needle hidden in it that he'd used to drug his opponents into unconsciousness. And so the story ends with Doc Lowry going to prison for this. I'm assuming because it's technically an assault outside the realm of the boxing ring. It's a good thing you were watching, Pop. The hell's he talking about? It was the detectives who did all the watching. Following that, we have Scoop Scanlon, 5-star reporter. You would think with that name he was always destined to be a journalist, but actually his parents intended for him to drive construction excavators. Scoop Scanlon, ace reporter of the Bulletin, rouses his sleepy-eyed pal and photographer, Rusty James, and plans to go into action. Action being the name of the bar down the street. Scoop says they're going to the docks. I have a tip from headquarters. An international jewel thief is landing today. U.S. officials captured him and brought him back. 1. What headquarters? Aren't you in a newspaper office? 2. If it's from your higher-ups, how is it a tip? Isn't this just an assignment? When they arrive at the airport to view the thief's arrival, Rusty spots what appears to be some goons with machine guns under their coats. Scoop orders Rusty to warn the cops about the impending attack, but they're too late as the goons open fire. Scoop decides to intervene anyway, leaping onto one of the gunmen while the police rush in. The thief, Arnold, makes a break for it with one of the goons, our heroes in hot pursuit. Scoop grabs a deserted Tommy gun and leaps into a cop pal's car. Step on it, they're getting away! Call the papers and tell them I've got a better headline. Reporter mows down jewel thief gang. Rusty's approach is only slightly less goofy than the machine gun-toting reporter. Hitch a ride in the crook's car via their spare tire. There's apparently another car full of criminals too, and after some chase shenanigans, Scoop opens fire on it and disables it. Since this was in the days before Hollywood movies shoved nitroglycerin into cars, it doesn't explode or anything. The other car with Rusty on it soon comes to a halt, our heroes and the cops soon forcing them out. They surrender. Keep 'em up, you two, or I'll make make this little typewriter talk. Is that why Scoop leapt into action with that thing? He thinks that's a typewriter?
This is a gun?
The story ends with Rusty saying he wants some credit in the story too, since he punctured their gas tank while attached to the spare tire, which is what caused them to slow down. Rusty, you're the hero of the day. Here, this Tommy gun is for you. And thus we move into our final story of Action Comics number 1, Tex Thompson. Having struck it rich in the oil fields of Texas, Tex Thompson has left his native country to tour the world. Antarctica proved to be a poor first choice for his world tour. As our story opens, we find Tex in a small town in England. The inactivity is beginning to bore him. God, it's so boring here in England in 1938, and I bet it's gonna stay that way for the next few years. Tex is walking along when a young boy named Robert spots him, wanting to know if he's a cowboy. The two walk for a bit until Robert sees something in the road. A dead body. Tex tells Robert to head for the cops while he stays behind to watch the body. However, after he goes, a woman witnesses all this go down and steps out, claiming that Tex must have killed him. Coincidentally, the sheriff arrives on the scene. The woman accuses Tex of committing murder, but Tex just explains that he sent Robert to go fetch him. I'm sorry, son, but I'll have to hold you on suspicion of murder. Realizing that unless Bob returned, the circumstantial evidence would be against him, fearing that something might have happened to the younger, Tex decides to go looking for the boy himself. And he punches the sheriff. I'd say this is an incredibly stupid thing to do, but he is a rich white guy, so he'll probably get away with this. You murderer! You've probably killed this man too! Yeah, this is starting to stack up. Well, you're next, lady. Don't worry, miss. He'll be all right in a little while. I used the Texan nerve pinch on him, aka hitting him. After running off, Tex realizes that it's pretty suspicious that this woman was so determined to call him a murderer, so he spies on her as she walks into a valley and a wooden shack that looks quite a bit like a very nice cabin. Listening through a window, Tex learns that her and a gang she's with murdered the man and planned to accuse the first person who came along of the deed. Seems a bit convoluted, especially since they could have just buried the body somewhere. I mean, what would have happened if nobody came along for them to frame? She explains that the sheriff regained consciousness and is now getting more men to search for Tex. However, we also see that her gang came across Robert and kidnapped him, which is why he never returned. She orders them to murder him to eliminate the witness. That's why Bobby didn't come back. Well, I'll have to get him out of this mess. I know! I'll be like Johnny West and hand over a pair of cowboy boots to him. That'll get him out of this scrape. Do any of you even remember Johnny West? I've been doing this for 15 years, and I understand that the footwear-based characters from comic book quickies fall by the wayside. Robert is brought out to be killed, but Tex gets the drop on them and he takes down the gangster. After knocking him out, he takes the guy's gun and tells Robert to keep watch outside while he goes to confront the gang. However, Robert kinda sucks at this and the guy he attacked wakes up, apparently having a spare gun at the ready. Robert kicks the guy in the shin and makes a run for it, yelling out a warning to Tex. However, this distracts our hero and allows the gang to counterattack. They decide not to kill him at first. Wanting to continue the con, they want to make it look like the woman, Sonia, killed him in self-defense. Meanwhile, Robert runs out of breath and has to slow down as he heads to the sheriff's office. He runs into a friend of his, Betty, and explains the situation. He has her go to the cops while he doubles back to check on Tex. Learning what's going to happen, he sneaks over to Tex and cuts his bonds. Robert provides a distraction for Tex. Look out, the American is loose! You said it, sister! I'm loose! And I'm mad! The laxatives kicked in at a most inopportune time! Mad as an aroused bull!
Why are we not still doing phrasing?
Tex sails into the gang, oblivious to the fact that he's outnumbered, and oblivious to the motion lines cutting his head into a triangle, jeez. Despite knocking Tex out again, the gang proceeds with the plan, telling him to make a run for it once he's awake again, and planning to shoot him. However, Tex manages to reach the safety of some rocks. Meanwhile, Betty reaches the sheriff's office and gets him up to speed. And speed is the right word, because he's soon arriving at the shack with a bunch of cops, who call out for the gang to surrender. One tries to run for it, but is shot for his trouble. The gang is escorted to jail as Tex joins the cops. I'm sorry for that punch I gave you, Sheriff. I deserved it. Yes, how dare you want to bring someone potentially involved in a murder in for questioning, I guess. He says he should have seen through Sonia's story, but whatever. Turns out there's a big reward for the capture of this gang. And so our comic ends with Tex saying that it should be split between Robert and Betty for being the real heroes of the day here. The other stories of Action Comics #1 are overall fine. Let's evaluate them individually. Chuck Dawson is a decent start to a Western story. Standard fare, though the addition of him knowing jujitsu makes it a little more hilarious than I think they were intending. Points also to the artwork feeling a lot more detailed despite being in black and white compared to some of the other stories. Zatara is an overall fine beginning, but even for Golden Age storytelling, the presentation is kind of weird, time jumping around rapidly, and a lot of details end up coming across unclear, like how they don't establish clearly on that there are several police coming along, and the Brady switch is just kind of odd in how it's presented, especially when you consider he's supposedly in league with the crooks. But then he's thrown from the train without the good guys wondering why they do that. Still, Zatara himself is great. His magic gives him a lot of power, but he's still just a guy and can be injured, so there's still tension. Sticky Mitt Simpson is not really that funny. The Adventures of Marco Polo is just very bland, telling the broad strokes of a journey but not really giving anything in the way of character or depth to the people involved in these events. Sure, it's more an historical thing, but it's not really showing why we should care about a figure like Marco Polo, who himself is only a bit part in his own story at this age, beyond the travel itself. Pep Morgan is a fun little boxing tale, and shockingly enough, this wasn't his first appearance. I actually wrote in a joke about how Pep barely had anything to do with his first story, but no, he appeared in another book 2 years previously. I don't know how you sustain an ongoing series of stories about a boxer like this, but apparently he did so until 1941, so what do I know? Scoop Scanlon is shocking in how our title character is just ready to drop the reporter stuff and go on a rampage should he need to. But still, overall good stuff. And finally, Tex Thompson is one of the longer stories, and while it does kind of drag in spots because of its repetitive beat of knocking Tex out and being recaptured, it's not bad and doesn't feel like it's taking forever to get through. But yeah, the non-Superman stuff in Action Comics #1 doesn't really have as much staying power as Superman in my opinion. I think part of it has to do with comic tropes of the time. The rest of these stories don't come across as origins like Superman's does, since writers at the time generally didn't do that because first issues were risky ventures compared to long-established titles. Zatara was the closest, and obviously was the other character to last longer compared to the others, whereas said others were fairly run-of-the-mill protagonists. Nothing is awful, but Superman was the right force to keep the book going for over 1,000 issues later. Next time, another Patreon-sponsored review as we travel back to the Marvel UK Transformers comics.
Sitting on my couch reviewing comics, the worst words that you will ever see. It's sad that comic books are for geeks, but they're not. They're for everybody. Linkara. If you doubt that I am a man, I am a man.
The red flame of gunfire stabs the darkness, and Detective Brown slumps forward. The detective is merely stunned. It's a good thing his handgun was set on stun.
Hello my friends, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for notifications on new video releases. If you'd like to support future videos, you can check out my Patreon or purchase a t-shirt via Teespring or Shark Robot. Thanks for watching!